I don't know why the road felt wrong the moment I turned onto it, but something in me tightened, like my instincts were pulling on invisible reins, urging me to stop. Maybe it was the timing. The Wednesday before Thanksgiving, when the Northeast feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for snow or something worse. Maybe it was the slow death of my cell signal, each bar disappearing as if deliberately stepping away from me. Or maybe it was the way the trees leaned over the road like witnesses. I kept driving, gripping the wheel until my knuckles blanched. I told myself the isolation was what I wanted. Silence, escape, space to breathe without pretending to smile across a Thanksgiving table. The GPS pushed me down a series of unmarked roads, each narrower than the last, gravel crackling beneath the tires like bones snapping one by one. When the forest finally opened, the A-frame cabin appeared, tall, dark, perfectly symmetrical, its massive windows staring back at me like two silent watchers. Something about those windows. I felt exposed before I even stepped out of the car, and yet I still told myself I was being dramatic. But the truth is, some places don't want to be visited. The air hit me first, sharp, metallic, almost tasting like wet coins as I stepped out and shut the car door. It carried the scent of rotting leaves and something faintly sweet, like fruit left too long on a counter. I remember standing still for a moment, letting the silence press against my eardrums until it became a physical weight. No wind, no birds, not even the distant hum of traffic. Just suspension. I dragged my duffel bag up the staircase, the wooden planks groaning with each step. Not normal creaks, these groans felt expressive, like relief or warning. Elias, the host with no profile picture, had texted simple instructions. Key in lockbox, code 1124. Do not disturb the basement. That last line had bothered me more than it should have. Why mention the basement at all? Why emphasize it unless there was something to hide? I opened the lockbox, retrieved the key, and stepped inside. Heat washed over me immediately. Dry, heavy, almost suffocating. The air smelled sterile, like the aftermath of a deep cleaning layered over a faint coppery scent that tugged at something primal in my brain. I should have left. I should have. But the door clicked shut behind me like a trap resetting. The cabin's interior was almost too perfect, too curated. The kind of place staged for an Airbnb photo shoot rather than an actual human being. Polished wood floors, a towering stone fireplace, furniture arranged at deliberate angles that felt more like a ritual pattern than design. But what unnerved me most were the lindows. Floor-to-ceiling glass with zero curtains. The woods pressed against them like a living wall, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something stood just beyond the tree line, watching me from within the shadows. I kept unpacking my groceries anyway, because pretending nothing was wrong felt like the only defense I had. But the refrigerator stopped me cold. Inside, sitting alone on the top shelf, was a perfect slice of pumpkin pie. No note, no covering, just sitting there, waiting. The whipped cream on top glistened as though freshly added. The Airbnb listing said professionally cleaned, private check-in. So who left it? And why only one slice? I touched the plate. It was cold, but the pie smelled too strong, too fragrant, like it wanted my attention. I slammed the fridge door shut and forced myself to breathe evenly. Maybe it was a kind gesture? Maybe. But the unease in my gut whispered otherwise. Trying to gain control, I walked the hallway, examining the black and white photos on the wall. Old Thanksgiving scenes. Families gathered around long wooden tables, smiles stretched too wide, eyes that didn't reflect light, turkeys that looked oddly shaped. Something wrong with the limbs. I told myself I was imagining it, but as I looked closer, the images seemed to shift, not physically, but emotionally. Like the longer I stared, the more malicious the smiles became. The kind of smiles people wear when the photographer says, "Hold still," and something awful is about to happen. I reached the loft bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. My ears were ringing with the oppressive silence. Then, thump. A soft, rhythmic knock beneath the floorboards. Not pipes, not settling wood, a measured, deliberate beat. I froze. Elias's message echoed in my mind, "Do not disturb the basement." I held my breath. The sound stopped instantly, as if whatever was beneath me heard me listening. I exhaled slowly, feeling my heart thudding hard enough to shake my ribs. I told myself houses make noises, but houses don't pause their noises when you pay attention to them. Houses don't listen back. Night fell aggressively, swallowing the last light so fast it felt intentional. The windows turned into black mirrors, reflecting me back at myself while hiding whatever lurked outside. I heated a simple dinner, refusing to touch the pie, and sat on the couch with my laptop. But I kept glancing at the glass, not at the trees, at the spaces between them. Have you ever stared into total darkness long enough that your brain begins inventing silhouettes, human shapes, bent figures? I told myself it was pareidolia, but the tension in my chest wouldn't ease. A gust of wind slammed against the window, making me flinch so hard I dropped my fork. When I went to brush my teeth later, the uncanny feeling followed me. As I spit into the sink, movement caught my eye. The shower curtain was closed. I was certain, absolutely certain, I'd left it open earlier. The dread that filled me was cold and immediate. My hand shook as I grabbed the curtain and yanked it back. Empty. Tub dry. But in the drain lay a long, bright red hair. I stared at it, paralyzed. My hair is dark brown. I don't know why, but I couldn't throw it away. I just backed out slowly and closed the door. I lay in the loft bed fully dressed, staring at the ceiling beams, while the wind howled like an injured animal. The cabin felt alive, breathing, listening. My thoughts spiraled. Why was the pie there? Who used the shower? Why did the house react when I noticed things? At around 2 a.m., I finally drifted into a shallow, uneasy sleep until the digital chime of the front door keypad jolted me awake. Beep, beep, beep. Someone was entering the code. My blood iced over. The code was 4 digits. I heard 3, then a pause. Silence stretched thin like a wire. I felt watched, but didn't dare move. I waited for the 4th beep, clutching my phone like a lifeline despite having no service. The final beep never came. Instead, the door gave a soft thud, like a hand pressing against it. Then a laugh. Low, guttural, warm. Not the laugh of someone mocking me, the laugh of someone welcoming me, inviting me. I didn't sleep after that. I just stared at the stairs leading down to the front door, praying for sunrise. And in those hours of waiting, I swear I heard footsteps pacing slowly around the outside of the cabin. When morning finally came, I rushed to the window, and my hope died instantly. Overnight, a heavy snowstorm had buried my car so completely it looked like a mound of white. The road was erased, replaced by an endless stretch of frozen wilderness. I was trapped. The daylight didn't bring comfort, it only exposed how isolated I truly was. I forced myself downstairs, telling myself the keypad sound was a dream. Stress. Exhaustion. But the kitchen stole whatever denial I had left. 3 rusted kitchen knives were laid out on the island, each one pointing toward the living room where I'd slept. Old knives, bone handles cracked with age. I hadn't seen them last night. They weren't mine. My throat tightened. "Is someone here?" I yelled into the air, my voice sounding foreign and thin. Silence swallowed my words. Every window was locked from the inside. The front door's deadbolt was still thrown. So how did someone lay those knives out? A horrifying thought slithered into my mind. Maybe they never left. Fear shifted into anger then. Thin, brittle anger. I stomped toward the basement door. If something was in this house, it had to be below. But when I touched the doorknob, it was ice cold. I twisted the knob. Locked. I rattled it harder, the vibration echoing through the wood like knocking. Then I froze. Behind the door, faint as a memory, came music. Old jazz, grainy, warped. The kind of sound that belongs on a record from the 1930s. It played in a scratchy loop. The hairs on my arms prickled. Suddenly, the basement wasn't just a forbidden area, it was occupied. I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes on the door like it might open itself. I grabbed the landline on the wall, the decorative rotary phone I assumed was dead. To my shock, it had a dial tone. My breath caught. I dialed 911 so fast I almost dropped the receiver. It rang. Once. Twice. Then a click. 911, what is your emergency? The voice was a woman's. Normal. I exhaled. Someone is in the house. I'm trapped. I need help. Silence. A long one. Then her voice changed. Lower. Raspy. The turkey needs basting, Elias. My stomach dropped. What? A pause. Then louder. The preparation must begin. I slammed the phone down, stumbling backward. Only then did I notice the phone cord dangling loose from the wall, not connected to anything. Panic hollowed me out. I grabbed one of the rusted knives and backed into the living room, keeping the basement door in sight. Hours passed. Or minutes. Time didn't feel right in that place. The smell came next, slow, creeping, unmistakable. Roasting turkey, savory herbs, butter, the comforting scent of Thanksgiving dinner. But it twisted my stomach with dread because the oven was off. I checked twice. The smell wasn't coming from the kitchen. It was seeping through the floorboards, from the basement. Mixed with it was something else. Something rotten beneath the pleasant aroma, like meat left too long in a warm room. My heart pounded painfully. The music had stopped. Now there were slow, dragging sounds. Metal clattering, footsteps, heavy ones. Someone was preparing a meal down there. For me. The fear became unbearable. I realized the basement wasn't just a threat, it might be the only way out. If there was a storm cellar door, I could escape. I searched for anything to pry the door open. My hands shook as I grabbed a heavy screwdriver. I jammed it under the hinge pin and hammered with my shoe, each hit ringing like a countdown. Would you go down there? Would you even touch that door? When the hinge pins finally popped free, the basement door sagged open, releasing a wave of humid, suffocating heat that smelled of cooked meat and damp earth. My pulse hammered in my ears as I held the knife in one hand and my phone flashlight in the other. I stood at the top of the wooden stairs, staring into pure blackness. The air felt thick, almost alive, brushing against my skin like fingers. "Hello?" I whispered. My voice didn't echo. It vanished, swallowed instantly. I forced myself down the steps one at a time, each creak sounding like a scream. At the bottom, my flashlight flickered across shelves lined with mason jars, hundreds of them. Inside were personal belongings, wallets, rings, keys, and teeth. My mouth dried. Every jar labeled with a Thanksgiving date, 2019, 2020, 2021, a sickening pattern. My light panned right and froze. A long wooden table was set for a feast, fine china, silverware, unlit candles, and at the head of the table sat a figure wearing a pilgrim costume, face stretched with dried human skin. Before it lay a steaming turkey, misshapen, wrong. My legs nearly buckled. The preparation wasn't beginning. It had already begun. The sight of that table, perfectly set in the middle of an earthen basement, destroyed any remaining sense of reality I had left. Something inside me cracked. I staggered backward, clutching the knife like a child grips a nightlight. The heat coming from the turkey felt wrong, like it radiated through the very soil. I couldn't look at its misshapen shape for more than a second at a time. The mannequin at the table's head was positioned too naturally, its posture eerily human. My flashlight flickered across its face, tightening my throat. The skin wasn't plastic. It wasn't artificial. It had pores, cracks, age lines. And the eyes, empty sockets stuffed with dried herbs, sage and rosemary crammed inside, as if someone wanted to make it smell alive. I whispered to myself over and over, trying to anchor my sanity. This isn't real. This isn't real. But the heat, the scent, the presence, they were too tangible, too purposeful. I stumbled away from the table, my breath coming in ragged bursts. That's when I noticed something else. Footprints. Human footprints in the dirt, circling the room. Not old, fresh, leading from the banquet table toward a dark corner of the cellar, the corner where the music had been playing. I followed the footprints because fear does strange things to logic. Each step I took felt like stepping deeper into someone else's nightmare. The footprints disappeared behind a stack of old wooden crates. My flashlight beam trembled as I angled it upward and froze. Carved into the packed earth wall were dozens, maybe hundreds of names, each one etched with obsessive precision. Beneath every name, a date, Thanksgiving. The oldest one I saw read 1894. The most recent was last year. My knees buckled as I scanned the names. Some were crossed out, others weren't. A sickening realization settled in my stomach. This wasn't random. This wasn't opportunistic. This was a tradition, a ritual, a generational collection. My heartbeat became painful, like each beat punched my ribs. Then I saw something carved lower, almost hidden beneath a crate. My flashlight caught on the letters, Elias Harrow, 1956. The host's name. I felt dizziness wash over me. The date wasn't crossed out. I didn't understand the meaning. Was he a victim or the perpetrator? My breathing quickened. The air felt thinner. Traditions, families, Thanksgivings. Some families passed down recipes. Others passed down curses. I swallowed hard as the question clawed into my mind. Which one was this? I backed away from the wall, trying to think, trying to breathe, but the basement felt like a shrinking lung. I turned toward the stairs, toward escape, but halfway up the steps, a sound froze me in place. Something dragged across the dirt behind me. Slow. Heavy. I snapped around, flashlight shaking wildly. The mannequin, the one seated at the head of the table, wasn't in its chair anymore. It stood halfway between the table and the stairs, angled slightly toward me. The pilgrim hat cast a shadow that made its skin look wilted, sagging. My hands went numb. I pressed myself against the steps, my legs failing to lift me higher. My instinct screamed at me to run, but my body refused to obey. No, 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 I whispered. The mannequin didn't move, but something about its stance was different, expectant, as if waiting for a cue. My flashlight trembled as I slowly illuminated the space behind it. That's when I saw the drag marks, deep grooves in the dirt floor leading from the table to where it now stood. Something had moved it, or someone. My throat tightened. I wasn't alone, not even close, and whoever or whatever was orchestrating this wasn't hiding anymore. I scrambled up the stairs, practically throwing myself into the kitchen.
I slammed the basement door shut, even though it no longer had hinges, bracing it with a chair as if that could stop anything I had seen down there. My breath was jagged, my limbs trembling so violently I nearly dropped the knife. The air upstairs felt colder now, as if a draft seeped through the walls. I checked the windows compulsively. Locked. Checked the front door. Locked. Checked every room. Empty. But the house didn't feel empty. The silence felt predatory, like something held its breath the moment I entered a room. I paced the living room, whispering to myself, think, think. But my mind replayed the basement on a loop. The jars, the names, the mannequin, the banquet waiting for a guest. I felt watched, scrutinized, evaluated. My stomach twisted painfully. A wave of nausea hit me, and I leaned on the kitchen counter, gripping the edge until my knuckles whitened. Then I noticed something that hadn't been there earlier. A turkey baster. It sat on the counter beside a small bowl of herbs, fresh, vibrant, as if just chopped. Beside it lay a folded piece of paper with a single word in blocky handwriting. Soon. I backed away from the counter slowly, feeling something inside me unravel thread by thread. My mind refused to comprehend how these objects were appearing. I checked every door again, every window, every lock. There was no point. I wasn't dealing with someone breaking in. I was dealing with something already inside. I felt an overwhelming urge to flee into the snow, to run until my legs gave out. But I knew I wouldn't survive the cold. The storm outside had only gotten worse. Whiteout conditions. The trees looked like skeletal figures huddled together, whispering. I pressed my forehead to the glass, feeling the cold seep into my skull. And that's when I saw it. A figure standing at the tree line. Tall. Thin. Still. Wearing what looked like a pilgrim hat. My breath fogged the glass violently as panic flared inside me. I blinked hard. The figure was gone, erased by the storm, or hiding. I stumbled away from the window, my voice cracking as I whispered, "What do you want from me?" The house answered with a sharp crack from somewhere deep within the walls, a warning shot, or an invitation. Would you check the basement again? Would you dare?
I needed evidence, something to make sense of the nightmare. I grabbed my phone, praying for even one bar of service. Nothing. I opened the Airbnb app to show myself the listing to prove I hadn't hallucinated the entire trip. But the listing wasn't there, not even in my history. No record, no messages. The host profile was gone too, deleted or erased. My pulse roared in my ears. It felt like the world was being rewritten around me. I checked my bank app, hoping for clarity. The payment was there, but the transaction name sent a cold spear down my spine. The Harvest. No address, no email, just those two words. My skin crawled. My hands shook as I scrolled, trying to find any trace of the booking. Nothing. It was like the cabin had always existed outside normal rules, outside the part of reality that leaves digital footprints. I stumbled back as the faint smell of roasting meat grew stronger again. This time it wasn't coming from below. It drifted from the vents overhead, warm and steady. I listened, holding my breath. Underneath the vent's hum, I heard another sound, faint, rhythmic scraping, like someone sharpening a knife. It echoed through the ducts. I snapped. Fear pushed me into frantic motion. I grabbed my coat, boots, and the largest knife from the set on the counter. My plan, if you could call it that, was simple. Force my way through the snowstorm, freeze or escape. Either fate felt less horrifying than staying inside. I shoved open the front door, and the wind punched me in the chest with a violent cold. Snow whipped sideways, stinging my face like tiny shards of glass. I stepped out, but froze immediately. Clear footprints led from the tree line to the door. Not mine. Bare footprints. Long. Angled slightly inward. Human, but wrong. They stopped right at the threshold as if someone had stood there for a long time. Watching. Waiting. My heartbeat thundered. I looked out into the storm, but visibility was only a few feet, just swirling white. I slammed the door shut, chest heaving. As I stepped backward, my foot landed on something. Soft, chilled. I looked down. A slice of pumpkin pie sat neatly on the floor mat, the same one from the fridge, except now the whipped cream looked disturbed, like someone had taken a finger and dragged it through the center. I dropped the knife. My scream lodged in my throat. I backed into the living room, unable to tear my eyes from the pie. The house felt smaller. The walls felt closer. Every shadow seemed to pulse. My breath came in rapid bursts, turning the air thin and sharp. Then all the lights flickered. Once, twice. On the third flicker, the entire living room went dark. I stood frozen, gripping the air, heartbeat pounding in my ears. The darkness felt heavy, almost textured. I fumbled for my phone flashlight and switched it on. The beam lit the floor, trembling wildly in my shaking hand. Something moved in the periphery of the light, something low, dragging across the floorboards. My throat constricted as I forced myself to look. Nothing there, just emptiness. But I heard it again, a dragging, shuffling sound coming from the stairs to the loft. Slowly, deliberately. My flashlight beam climbed the steps, one by one. Halfway up, I froze. A small trail of dirt led down the steps, fresh, leading from the loft bedroom where I'd slept. My stomach twisted violently. The sound came again, followed by a faint creaking like weight shifting on the bed above. Something had been watching me sleep. Something had been inches from my unconscious body. I couldn't go upstairs. I couldn't stay downstairs. I felt trapped inside a shrinking maze. My mind raced, screaming for logic that didn't exist anymore. And then all at once, the dragging stopped. Silence slammed into the room. It felt like the whole cabin went still, waiting, listening. I swallowed dryly, inching toward the center of the room where I could see every entrance. A sudden thud hit the front door, hard enough to rattle the frame. I jumped, nearly dropping my phone. Another thud, then another. 3 knocks, slow, deliberate, spaced too evenly. My chest tightened. My voice shook as I whispered, "Who's there?" The 4th knock wasn't a knock. It was a scratch, long, slow, crawling down the wood like fingernails trailing down skin. My stomach lurched. I stepped back, gripping the knife I'd dropped earlier. The scratching stopped as suddenly as it began. Silence swelled again. I whispered to myself, "This isn't happening." Then something whispered back, a low voice, pressed against the crack of the door, words muffled but unmistakable. "Come to dinner." I froze, my jaw trembled. The voice was old, male, calm, and impossibly close. I stumbled backward, my legs barely holding the upright. I backed into the kitchen, the world blurring as terror surged through me. My only thought was escape, any escape. If the front door was blocked, I'd find another way. I grabbed the heaviest object I could find, a cast iron pan, and sprinted to the nearest window. I hurled the pan with everything I had. It bounced off harmlessly with a dull clang. Not even a crack. Hurricane glass. Reinforced. I screamed in frustration and slammed the pan again and again, each hit weaker than the last. My arms trembled. My breath came in shallow bursts. The window didn't even scratch. The house was built to keep people in, or keep something else out. The smell of roasting meat thickened, wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. The vents hissed, exhaling warm air that carried the scent of sage stuffing and something darker, something metallic. The sharpening sound returned from behind the walls, slow, rhythmic strokes. Shook, shook, shook. I pressed my hands over my ears, but the sound crawled through my skull. And beneath the sharpening, a second sound rose. Footsteps, descending from the loft. "No," I whispered. My voice cracked. Something was coming down to meet me, and dinner was almost ready.
The footsteps descending from the loft were slow, deliberate, unhurried, each one a measured promise. I stumbled backward into the living room, gripping the knife with slick, shaking hands. My flashlight beam jittered wildly, illuminating only slices of the staircase at a time. The steps creaked under the weight of something heavy, heavier than a person should be. The air grew warmer, thick with the scent of cooked meat and dried herbs. My breath hitched as a shadow appeared on the lower steps, long, distorted, bending unnaturally across the wall. I forced the flashlight upward, my hands trembling violently. Something stood at the top of the stairs, tall, thin, wearing that same pilgrim hat I'd seen at the tree line, but its face was wrong. Its head tilted at an angle a human neck couldn't manage. Its silhouette twitched, like multiple shapes fighting over the same outline. "Stay back," I whispered, voice cracking. The figure remained utterly still. Then, slowly, its hand gripped the railing, long fingers, skin stretched too tight over bone. It began descending again, each step calculated, each movement deliberate. My legs threatened to give out entirely, because whatever was coming down those stairs wasn't human, and it was hungry. I fled toward the kitchen without thinking, instinct overriding reason. The footsteps followed faster now, gaining confidence, eager. I grabbed anything I could find to barricade the doorway: a stool, a chair, the trash bin, even the kitchen table pushed sideways. My movements were frantic and sloppy, but adrenaline made me strong enough to shove the furniture into a barrier. I held the knife outward, trying to stop my hands from shaking. The footsteps paused on the other side of the wall. Silence. That awful, heavy silence that always comes before something breaks. Then, tap. A single knock on the other side of the kitchen wall. Not on the door, on the wall. Tap, tap, tap. Moving along the wall's length, as if the thing was tracing its way to find another entrance. My stomach twisted painfully. The tapping stopped directly beside me, inches away through the wall. I felt the faintest vibration against my shoulder, like a fingertip pressing from the other side. "You've been chosen," a voice whispered, a rasping, hollow murmur slipping through the vents. A guest. The barrier I built suddenly felt useless, paper thin. The kitchen lights flickered again. The air tasted like metal. I backed away from the wall, every nerve screaming. The cabin groaned, wood straining as if something massive shifted its weight inside the structure itself. The voice seeped from every vent now, like the house had learned to speak. "Come down, the feast cools." I clamped my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The words vibrated inside my skull. My thoughts splintered under the pressure. I stumbled toward the basement door, the only place left to go, even though every instinct screamed that descending again meant death. But staying meant something worse. I kicked the barricade aside and grabbed the screwdriver I'd used earlier. The basement door still hung loosely, barely held in place. As I stepped toward it, I heard something behind me, a long, dragging sound across the floor. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I saw whatever was there, my mind would break completely. I shoved the door aside and descended into the darkness, the heat rising up to meet me like a breath from something alive. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, but something was different. The banquet table glowed with fresh candles now, flames burning tall and steady. And at the head of the table, the mannequin no longer stood. It was seated again, waiting. My legs locked. The mannequin's head was tilted downward, chin nearly touching its chest, as if studying the food before it. But something about the posture was expectant, like it was waiting for someone to take the seat opposite it. A chair had been pulled out on the far end of the table. My chair. The turkey in the center steamed gently, its twisted limbs twitching slightly as if settling into place. I gagged, stumbling backward. That's when I noticed the walls. The carved names I'd seen earlier now glowed faintly, as if lit from beneath the earth. The dates flickered like dying candle flames. And at the very bottom of the wall, the place where Elias Harl's name had been, another name was carved beneath it. Fresh, the dirt still crumbling around the letters. My name. My vision blurred. My throat tightened until breathing felt impossible. I backed into a shelf of jars, my elbow knocking one to the ground. It shattered, spilling out several small yellow teeth, children's teeth. A wave of nausea slammed into me. The candles flickered. The mannequin's head jerked, an abrupt, unnatural twitch, lifting slightly as if acknowledging I'd seen my name, as if the ritual had recognized me. I turned to run, but the basement door above slammed shut with the violence that shook dust from the ceiling. Total darkness swallowed the room until my flashlight steadied. Panic surged through me like electricity. I sprinted toward the coal chute I'd spotted earlier, the cramped, rusted opening barely visible in the corner. It looked impossibly small, but desperation makes impossible things necessary. I dropped to my knees and clawed at the latch. The rust cut into my palms, but I didn't care. I heard movement behind me, slow, deliberate crunches of dirt. Something was approaching. The latch wouldn't budge. I kicked it. Again. A scream tore from my throat. Not human, not controlled. The latch snapped loose, a blast of freezing air rushing in. I shoved my shoulders into the chute, pushing hard. The iron scraped my skin, tearing fabric and flesh. My flashlight clattered from my hand, rolling across the dirt floor. Its beam caught something behind me. A shape. Tall, lean. Wearing the pilgrim hat. Its face drooped like wax melting over bone. A smile carved itself across its skin. A voice, soft as a caress. "You're late for carving." I screamed and shoved myself deeper into the chute. The metal walls shredded my arms as I crawled upward, pulling myself through the tight, claustrophobic tunnel. Snow poured in from the opening, stinging my raw skin. Behind me, something scraped its fingers along the iron. Long, slow drags. Shk, shk, shk. My legs kicked wildly, desperate to escape the sound. My head burst through the surface into blinding white snow. I clawed my way out, gasping for air that felt colder than knives. I rolled onto my back, trembling uncontrollably, blood mixing with the snow. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I forced myself to stand, my legs barely holding me. The forest loomed, dark and infinite. I stumbled forward, each step a battle, the storm swallowing my footprints instantly. My lungs burned, my vision swam. Somewhere behind me, below the snow, I heard something pounding against metal. Once, twice, then a muffled, enraged howl that chilled my marrow. I pushed harder, crashing through branches, my boots slipping in drifts. I no longer cared where I was going. I only knew I had to put distance between myself and that cabin. My body was failing, slowing, numbing. But terror kept me upright. Terror kept me breathing. Terror kept me alive, barely. It felt like hours before I saw headlights through the storm. A plow truck rumbled down the road, its yellow lights cutting through the blizzard like salvation. I threw myself toward it, waving my arms, screaming until my voice broke. The driver slammed the brakes and leapt out, wrapping a heavy coat around me. "Jesus Christ, kid, you'll freeze to death out here," he shouted. His voice was real. Human. I clung to it. "The house. There's a man, something down there. He's trying to carve me, eat me." The driver's expression changed. Not disbelief. Recognition. He glanced toward the woods, his face draining of color. "There ain't no house back there. Nothing but burned ground. Been that way 30 years. My stomach dropped. I tried to protest, but my words tangled. He loaded me into the truck, turning up the heat. The interior lights flicked on, warm, golden, comforting, until I saw the object resting on the dashboard. A pilgrim hat. Old, worn, ash-stained. My entire body locked. Where did you get that?" I whispered. The driver didn't look at me. His hands tightened on the wheel. "Tradition," he said softly. "Some families pass down recipes." My heartbeat hammered in my skull. I stared at the hat, unable to form words. The truck lurched forward, tires crunching over snow. The forest passed in a blur, trees bending in the wind like mourners. "Don't worry," he murmured. "You'll be warm soon." The phrasing twisted something inside me. My breath fogged the window as I stared out desperately, searching for any sign of normalcy. But something caught my eye. Through the trees, a faint orange glow. Flames. A shape silhouetted in the firelight. The cabin, whole, standing proudly, its windows glowing like eyes. And in the doorway, a figure, tall, wearing the pilgrim hat, watching the truck drive away, waiting. My scream lodged in my throat. The cabin flickered out of view behind the trees, but the image seared itself into my mind. I turned to the driver again, voice cracking. "Please, let me go. Please." He smiled, small, tight, resigned. "A Haro never skips Thanksgiving. You should be honored. You survived long enough to be served." My blood froze. Haro. Elias Haro. The name carved in the basement wall. "We're almost there," he whispered. "The family's been waiting. This year's harvest is special." I lunged for the door handle, but it didn't open. Child luck. Panic filled my lungs like smoke. The driver didn't react, didn't try to stop me. He just watched, expression hollow, as if he'd seen this play out 100 times. I pounded the window until my fists ached. Nothing budged. The heater blasted hot air into my face, suffocatingly warm. The scent of sage stuffing crept through the vents. My stomach twisted violently. Why me? Why any of them? His eyes flickered toward me in the mirror. Thanksgiving is about gratitude, about giving back, about feeding the ones who came before us. Some families pray, some break bread. Ours offers flesh. My breath stopped. "But don't worry," he added, "you won't be wasted. The Harals never waste a guest." The truck turned onto a narrow path through the woods. I saw lanterns ahead, dozens of them, lining a clearing. Silhouettes moved between them, tall, thin figures wearing old-fashioned clothing, waiting, preparing. My heart pounded violently. I thought it might burst. The driver slowed, smiling faintly. "Welcome home," he murmured. "You're right on time." I don't remember escaping the truck. I don't remember running. I don't remember collapsing face first into the snow until headlights from another vehicle appeared. Different lights, different truck, a different stranger shaking me awake. All I remember is waking up in a hospital bed days later, the doctors saying I'd suffered severe hypothermia and hallucinations from exposure. They said there was no cabin, no driver, no footprints, no evidence, nothing. They chalked it up to stress, trauma, exhaustion. But the truth didn't stay buried, not for long. Every November, as the air turns sharp and the leaves rot sweetly on the ground, I feel it again. Heat on the back of my neck, like oven warmth breathing down my spine. Sometimes I hear footsteps in my apartment at night. Sometimes I wake to the smell of sage stuffing. Once, I found a single slice of pumpkin pie on my kitchen counter. Fresh, warm. And last night was the worst. Last night I found a receipt tucked under my front door. Same yellowed paper, same handwriting, but the message had changed. It didn't say paid in full. It said, "The family never forgets. See you this Thanksgiving.